Hello, everybody. I want to talk to y'all about that one call, that one call, the call that we've all had, fire department, police department, EMS, and the dispatch is always involved in it. Um, that one call. And then just when we think we had it, another one happens. More striking and more difficult and more damaging than the one before. That one call. My name is Louis Carlucci. I'm a retired fire captain from Chandler, Arizona Fire Department. I served from August 13th, 1984 till March 1st of 2012. I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio. Go Buckeyes, OH, IO. Prior to moving to Arizona in 1982, I was a firefighter on a small paid department in a suburb of Toledo. We had 3 stations, so we were very busy. On a cold fall night in 1974, I was riding tailboard on a 3-person engine company. We were first in on a large 2-story working fire with fire showing from the 2nd floor and impingement on the house to the north. I had already put my pack on while en route, I know, on tailboard. I caught the hydrant, and after charging the line, I ran up to the engine. Captain ordered me to pull 1.5 inches and go interior, and he took another line and went in between the houses to protect exposures. Still no additional help on scene. Understand now that I'm about, 23, 24 years old. And this is my first time being a real full-time firefighter. I had been a volunteer firefighter a few years before that. As I went up the front walk to the door, I was greeted by a screaming woman who told me her daughter was in the house on the 2nd floor, and she directed me to where the 2nd bedroom on the left was from the top of the stairwell. I yelled at Captain, but he couldn't hear me, and our engineer was also busy, so I dropped the line and ran in. I went up the stairwell, had heavy fire coming out of 2 rooms to the right. I went to the 2nd bedroom on the left as directed and closed the door behind me. Heavy smoke, but no fire. I opened the window and I did a brief sweep of the room, and I found her unconscious under the bed. Excuse me. I went to the window and yelled at the engineer. About that time, fire started to come through the top of the door. I knocked out the screen and straddled the windowsill while holding her. And we wore those leather New Yorker helmets. So I took my helmet off and I threw it at the engineer, and it actually hit him in the side of the leg, and he looked up and saw me. About that time, we had an ambulance and a ladder company arrived. They threw a ladder and came up and got the girl and took her down and transported her to the hospital. So I was feeling pretty proud of myself, kind of like Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto with Emergency. 6 weeks later, I was sitting at the picnic table on the apparatus floor at the main downtown station. I was assigned to fire inspections that day, and a woman and a young girl walked in and saw me and came up and asked if there was any way to contact the crew from the fire they had at their house. As soon as she told me the address, I realized who they were. I told her I was the guy that got her daughter out of the fire. We all started bawling, and it was just amazing. We just cried and cried. Took some pictures. That was a good call, a great outcome. That was that first one call trauma that I was going to have some more of here. It was a lot of confusion and disbelief once you realize what happened. As things happen on the scene, everything happens so quickly, and there's so much noise. And after that, I hadn't really thought about it a whole lot until that day. So trauma defined as an emotional response to a distressing event that can have lasting effects on a person's mental and physical health. If you talk to a street medic, what their favorite types of call are, they almost always tell you trauma. Now, it's a different kind of trauma than we're talking about here, but they do connect. There are 3 types of trauma: acute from a single incident, chronic, repeated, and prolonged exposures and complex exposure to varied and multiple events, often of an invasive and interpersonal nature. But Lou, you ask, how do I know if I'm traumatized? I'm glad you asked. Just like the assessments of ill or injured people, there are symptoms, and they are shock and denial and disbelief, confusion, difficulty concentrating, anger, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, self-blame, withdrawal, alcohol and drug abuse, feeling disconnected or sad or hopeless. Trust me, I've had all or one at one time or another. But back in those days, it was suck it up, buttercup, let's have another drink. Now, I had already been drinking since age 12. So on June 19th, 1977, that was Father's Day. My entire family was up at Mom and Dad's cottage in Irish Hills, Michigan at Lake Wilson. I wasn't there. My dad and I had been feuding and I didn't go. About 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon or in the evening, my dad had a massive CVA and died on that day. To this day, I have not forgiven myself. More trauma. Since I was already a drinker, this made it worse. I'll drink it away. Alcohol abuse, guilt, self-blame, anger. But you weren't at work, you say. Well, no. Trauma has no rules. We're our first responders. Has anybody ever stopped at a bad wreck on their day off? Has anybody ever had the neighbor come running over and talk about difficulty breathing or cardiac arrest at their house? Can you help? So, domestic violence at home, kicking the dog, alcohol and drug abuse at home, or out with the guys. Yeah, that's me. Not now, but back then. Several years were a blur of working, drinking, and a move to Arizona in 1982. After getting hired by Chandler Fire Department in August of 84, I was a uniform fire inspector and saw the need for a fire investigation division. I put a program together and presented it to the police and fire chiefs, and they loved it. I graduated from the Phoenix Police Academy in 1986 and was assigned to the Chandler Police Detective Division. It was a good fit. A lot of training, a lot of call outs. I became good friends with a lot of the officers. One Friday afternoon, an officer who I knew well came by my cubicle. I knew his family. He was separated from his wife, and he told me he was going to pick up his baby daughter Friday night after work and return her Saturday evening. He wanted to know if I was interested in going out for a few drinks Saturday night. Heck yeah. Saturday morning, my neighbor, who was also a detective, called and said that the officer's wife had been trying to reach him without success. She asked if he could go over and check on him. And then he asked me if I wanted to go too. We found him laying on his bed, face down, with a pillow over his head. His baby was in her crib, right next to the bed, crying. He did the deed right in front of her. I often wondered if it had any lasting effects on her. She's grown with children of her own now. I remember standing in my kitchen making food for the family and crying uncontrollably. My young daughter asking me, "Daddy, what's wrong?" Trauma. The city provided counseling through EAP. Several of us were really struggling. They had group sessions. There was about 17 of us. It was really a circus. After that, I had some individual sessions. They didn't help much, so I drank. In 1991, the department was getting more and more political. Everywhere I went, I had a cell phone shoved in my face. So I made a lateral transfer back into fire operations. I was assigned to a ladder company. I felt like I was home. In 93, I promoted to engineer, and in 2001, I promoted to captain. I was assigned to Engine 282, a busy company from North Chandler. We were one night available on radio at McQueen and Warner area, clearing from a call, and we got pinged for a 962, we called it, an accident with injuries at Hamilton Chandler Boulevard, approximately 2.5 miles away. En route, I was advised via MCT, our computer in the truck, that a car versus two pedestrians, and was very serious. I upgraded the call, to what we call 2-in-1 medical, which is 2 engines, a ladder company, and a battalion chief, and an ambulance. When we arrived at the scene, there were 2 Chandler Police Department officers. They were in a state of complete panic. There was a car up against the building, and one officer had a hold of the tire, and he was just trying to pull it off. 2 children had crossed Chandler Boulevard after dark against the light and were about 300 feet west of the intersection. The driver never saw them, brother and sister. Sister was lying in the middle of Chandler Boulevard, and brother was in the wheel well of the car. Both were deceased. That particular intersection is in the hood, if you know what I mean. The crowd was starting to gather, wanting the driver. So we arranged through Chandler Regional Hospital and Chandler Police to have the deceased girl transported to CRH and to have the driver ride in also with a police escort. We were ordered to do a CISD. Most of you probably know what that is, critical incident stress debriefing. It was to be held in the Chandler Police conference room. So we got done with the call, we picked up and went there. As we were waiting for the other crews, the ambulance crew brought us our medics who had ridden into the hospital. And then a Chandler police officer came in. He was visibly shaken. He was 2 weeks off probation. He took off his gun belt and his badge, and he tossed them on the table, and he said, "Pardon my French, I never signed up for this shit." And he turned around and left, and nobody ever saw him again. The CISD didn't amount to much. Life for us went on, drinking, working, promotions, retirements, children, divorces, hunting, fishing, life. Oh, and taco bus at the Union Hall. Those were always a blast. Around 2009, I was feeling like retirement was getting close. I felt like I had seen enough and done enough. I went into our deferred retirement option plan, the DROP. I set a date. There were 2 guys who were on that call with me that worked in my station at Station 2810 in South Chandler, but we didn't talk about that call very much. And trust me, that was that call. It was in 2011, my 28-year marriage ended, and I found out my then wife had been unfaithful, and we went through a divorce and bankruptcy. It was a long, drawn out, and times ugly deal. I thought it would never end, so I drank. Dozen beers for lunch, a couple fifths of whiskey at night. That became the norm. By the time I retired, I was living alone, me and the dogs. My days off, I was working to pay off the bankruptcy, and in 2013, the divorce was final. I'd met someone in 2812. She was amazing. She still is amazing. I was having feelings for her. I knew that she was special, but I thought if I told her everything, she wouldn't stay with me, so I kept it concealed. Along with my drinking, I hid it, or so I thought. On December 13th, 2013, I was home alone. I'd had enough. I hit the proverbial rock bottom. I decided to end it. I went into the bedroom and got my 9mm out and sat on the floor at the foot of the bed. I put the barrel in my mouth and I put it up against my head, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw my dog Jilly standing in the doorway. You can put that picture up, please. When we made eye contact, she came over and laid across my lap. She looked up at me with her sad eyes. I held her for a few minutes and got up and put the gun away. I knew at that moment that God wasn't done with me. And Jilly, being a golden retriever, they typically lived to 13 years old. Jilly lived to be 16 years old. I miss her to this day. 4 nights later, I was playing guitar solo at Celebrate Recovery I'd been going to. I was crying and I was a mess. And we were singing Christmas carols. I stopped mid-song and gave a short testimony. Since that night, December 17th, 2013, I've never touched another drop of alcohol. I realized, too, that the lady I loved had been walking me through it all, directing me, steering me, if you will. On June 14th, 2014, I married her. We are still married. She is one of the BluePaz providers, assisting first responders who suffer from PTSD, and she is my rock. Trust me, she is. I don't remember exactly when the nightmares started. Probably 2015, I think, maybe 2016. I don't remember, but they did, and they were intense, all on that one call. I guess it was my turn. I would see the little boy's arm protruding out from the wheel well. The police officer screaming, trying to pull the tire off. And then I wake up. Since then, over time, the nightmares have all but stopped, except for maybe once in a while. We were walking into Safeway one afternoon. We ran into one of the guys who was first in with me on the call. We chatted, and my wife walked away with the shopping cart, and he got up really close to me and very teary-eyed and shaking voice. He said, "Cap, do you still see it?" And I said, "Yeah." And there we were, standing in the exit door of a grocery store, two grown men with their arms around each other crying. He told me that he had his 20 in and was retiring. He said, "I can't do this anymore, Cap." And he turned and walked out. A couple years later, I went to my engineer's retirement party at Dos Gringos. We all stood around and told stories and had some tacos. And when they started bringing out trays of tequila, I told him it was time for me to go. He said he's going to walk me out. When we got out to the parking lot, I wished him well and we hugged, but he wouldn't let go of me. He asked me, "Do you still see it?" And I told him I did. I said, "Get help." As I said, my wife works for BluePaz. She also has a private practice. She does amazing work, as does everybody that's working at BluePaz. Every month, 7 to 10 first responders take their own lives. Lord only knows how many did so during the suck it up buttercup days. But today, help is out there. Company officers get training in what to look for in their firefighters and themselves. Police officers look for telltale signs. EMS and dispatch supervisors. And the municipalities are now coming on board with it as well, whatever it takes. Resilience, the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity. Trauma resilience, some people have it, for others it must be learned. There are 4 kinds: physical, mental, emotional, social. The saying that I kept seeing was resilience after trauma, from surviving to thriving. In our case, rescuing the rescuer. And I watched the gentleman that was on here yesterday too. And what really stuck with me was when he said, there is life after the job. And I think a lot of us forget that. If you survive the job, there is life after. So I want you to know that I shed some tears while I typed this out. It brought back a lot of memories, most of them not all good. I was reading it to my wife at the table, and she said, "Still got work to do." I wonder how the rest of my guys are doing that were on that call. I know for me, there's still more work to be done. She's right. There's trauma that I never addressed. I just let it stack up. We were never taught to recognize our own emotional trauma. We were trained to save others, tend to their injuries. It's a personal relationship. We say, "my patient," as they're getting transported. We feel possessive of those we spend so little time with because our paths crossed at a moment they needed my help. Perhaps I cared too much. But in the end, I'm the one that needs rescuing, that needs saving. As professionals, no matter if you're police, fire, EMS, or dispatch, we bring calm to a chaotic event. The end goal, resiliency. There's that word again. But that resiliency is one-sided. Until recent years, caring for a first responder who has seen one gruesome incident after another has not been on anyone's agenda. It used to be, if we talked about the grim scenes and the lost lives and what it does to us, we were considered weak. But we could go down to the corner bar and sit and drink whiskey until we were unconscious. That was okay. Reliving the pain of cumulative trauma is exhausting if you don't know the signs. It means admitting you are flawed, you're human, let go of the old ways, use the system, be honest. There's a lockstep approach to rescuing the rescuer, but it starts with becoming mindful, trusting, and willing to heal. There's also going to be trauma in one form or another. That's just life. If you lay in a bed of roses thinking everything will be all right, you'll end up getting pricked by the thorns. Don't get pricked. Get help. BluePaz is an amazing organization. They save lives, they save marriages. They give first responders the tools they need that allows them to continue their work of protecting the public. Get help. So I'd like to close this part of it, of the little prayer that I found. I thought was pretty nice. It says, Gracious Father in heaven, you know that first responders ride an emotional roller coaster, and no matter if their efforts are successful or unsuccessful, the things they see and do take a heavy toll on them physically and emotionally. Please guard their hearts and minds, restore their mental and emotional resources when they have been depleted, give them the tools to live and work productive lives. Let them not become weary in their good work. Amen.
Amen, Lou. That's really, really awesome, man. Thank you. And thanks for those kind words about BluePaz too. I really appreciate that. Means a lot coming from, someone with your experience base and all the things that you just spoke about and have been through. From the first day we met, we hit it off right at my office, and you weren't a patient. You came in as Christy's husband, and we were just chatting, and we just connected, and that's just how it is. Um, Thank you for your service again, publicly. I feel like, all of the people that you have touched in their lives, you've made a positive difference,
Thank,
Uh,
thank you. Thank you. I
yeah.
think Christy has some questions for me.
Yes, go for it, Christy.
I do. Well, I know in many ways, like powerful stories carry a lot of hidden nuggets. And I think there are just some extra questions that I wanted to pose your way to share, and then just to elaborate on as well, too. So, what do you know now that you wished you knew back then? So let's just even say, back then when you had that first CISD, when you had that first call, what do you know now that you wish you knew back then?
Um, I would have done stuff different. I would have done a lot of things different. Um, when we had that call, um, I was already carrying so much trauma that I had never had addressed. That it just piled up and piled up and piled up, and the only thing that I did to address it was drink more, and you know that didn't do anything for me. So um, there's three things that I would do differently now. Um, I want to address something first of all, because it's something that I didn't pay much attention to, and I should have, and that is your benefits, um, your health insurance, which also has provisions in it for things like BluePaz, and to pay attention to that stuff. Make sure you have the right coverage. If not, you know who to go to and talk to with your municipality. Pay attention to your pension. Getting old is not easy, folks. That's just a fact of life. Um, it's difficult. Stay in contact with your pension bureau, however your municipality does it. Secondly, alcohol is not going to make things okay. It won't help you relax. It won't help you get through hard times. It won't make bad memories go away, and it won't make you a better dancer. If you can stop having after having one drink, then don't even have the one drink. And lastly, most important to me is be honest. Right from the start, my dad told me this many years ago, and obviously I didn't listen. Don't sugarcoat anything. Lay it out there up front. Don't be deceitful. if it's too much for whoever, then so be it. But if you think you may have found the one, they now know everything. And if they stay, you've laid a good solid foundation. So
Okay, I appreciate that. And in many ways, I think that's, again, that message of, that there are some coping skills that definitely are more helpful than others. And certainly I'm hearing loud and clear that message that you're sending out is that, again, pay close attention to, those unhealthy or potentially unhealthy coping skills. For you, it was the alcohol. For others, it might be other things. So I
right,
appreciate
right.
definitely that element. But just on that heels of kind of that honesty and kind of that struggle, because that's a very relational aspect, right? That honesty, that communication. So I'm just curious, I'm just going to throw in a little bit of a curveball because I know we talked about the different questions. But just on that heels, what advice would you give additionally if someone was struggling in their relationship? Because again, that's something that can commonly come up, whether it's due to, just what their personal struggles are, or, just with what they've seen on their shift. What other encouragement would you give individuals?
Well, it comes back to if they're married, their spouse will notice. Their supervisors on the job, their captain or lieutenant or battalion chief will notice. And the biggest thing that I learned getting sober is to be humble. Put that big pride away. If somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, man, every time something happens, you explode," um, there's something going on. And chances are, if it's at work and it's one of your coworkers telling you, it's something that they were involved in too. Um, don't get that big, chest puffed out. Oh, suck it up, Buttercup. It's okay. Um, explore it. Go to the skipper. Or if it's the captain, go to the battalion chief and explore it, because if you don't, you're gonna eventually just implode, and it's gonna wreck your family. It's gonna wreck your career, and and it's kind of tied into that. Be honest right from the start. Yeah, I'm struggling with this call. I need to talk to somebody about it, and that way it's upfront. Now you're upfront, and now let's get you where you need to be to talk to who you're supposed to be talking to.
What made it hard for you? And I'm just going to piggyback off of what you just said. What made it hard for you to walk through that door, to even engage in some of those, few individual therapy sessions? What were the challenges that you kind of had to mentally walk through?
Um, Honestly, back in those days, um, I, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the trauma. I was more concerned about my guys. And I know there was five of us on the engine that night, first in, and then when the ladder company arrived, there was five on the ladder. And I know since then, besides me, there's been three other guys that have really, really suffered for it, and one of them actually had to take a leave of absence so to get the necessary stuff done. So, but personally, at that particular time, I didn't I didn't feel it, and I didn't start having nightmares until 3 or maybe even 4 years after I retired, which was, oh Lord, 14, almost 20 years after the call. And I've talked to some guys about that, and they said that they've heard that that's a pretty common occurrence, depending on what your position was when you had the call.
So it can show up years later. Sometimes you don't even feel it. And even if you have, an appointment or something scheduled that day, again, I've also heard others say, well, I'm kind of having a good day, so why should I go to this appointment? So
Right.
what advice would you give people, even if they're, no longer feeling it, or they're embarrassed, or they're worried that someone's going to find out? What would you encourage them to do?
I would encourage them to go through with it. Go ahead and do it. Talk to somebody. I've been doing really well with my stuff until I started preparing for this. And I mean, you saw me at the kitchen table, and I was a mess, and it just all came back. It was a big rush, and yeah, I need to get some more help and get working on it some more. So I would say, yeah, you're having a good day. I'm happy for you. Don't give up, because it's still in there, and it may not come out for a while, and then something will happen. It'll come out.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times those activating triggers can be a little shocking, right?
Yes.
Unexpected, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you kind of touched on this a little bit in your talk, but was just curious if you would go back and revisit, because I think sometimes even as we all sit in this space and have spent time and we, talk about wellness and again, talk about burnout and compassion fatigue and what, trauma can do. What are some of those symptoms that first responders should pay close attention to and again, not dismiss?
Um, the biggest one, I should say the most prevalent one is anger, short fuse. Um, and there's a whole slurry of bevy of other things, there's depression, geez, honey, are you in a bad mood? Yeah, I'm okay though, um, the drinking. And I keep going back to the drinking because that was, my downfall. That was my albatross hanging around my neck. But you become a habitual drinker, like is what I did. I never drank on duty, not ever. But if I was home, and I usually tried to make sure I was home on my days off by 3 o'clock, because at 3 o'clock, I wanted to sit down on the back porch and knock down a fifth or two of whiskey. And that was my, it was just the way I did things. And so many of the guys are, have a couple beers with supper, or, sit out in the back around a bonfire and have a 6-pack or something. But the spouses and the close friends know what the norm is. They know where that line is, and they keep seeing them go over that line. That's another huge deal. Firefighting is it's a drinking job, I would always call it. Same thing with a lot of the cops that I knew. We spent our nights off, especially if it was a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. We were happy to go out and go drinking. And St. Patrick's Day, for example, is like a holy day to the firefighters. Bagpipes and parades, and we would get drunk and get sober and get drunk again on St. Patrick's Day. And internally, we were trying to blow off steam. We were trying to get this memory to go away. We didn't want to see it no more. So I'm not thinking about it, but I'm going to keep pounding. And you're going to end up drinking yourself into an early grave. And it's going to ruin your family life. It's going to ruin your professional life. So if you can sit down and have one or two drinks and you don't need to have another drink, God bless you. But like I said earlier, if you can sit down and just have one drink, why even bother having the one? I'm not wired like that. If I'm going to sit down and have a drink, I'm going to drink the bottle. So,
Christy, Lou, we have a question that came in. Could I bother you?
Yeah.
This is from a fellow fire captain. What advice do you have for captains, public safety leaders, to balance being present for their crews while still maintaining self-care?
In all honesty, I was always there for my guys and gals, but I never looked out after myself. And so it's a situation where if there's another officer in the station, someone you can confide into, or your battalion chief is your boss, or your other half at home, someone that you have can confide in, where you can say, you know, I'm waking up in the middle of the night, or I can't sleep, or um, we ran this call, and I just can't get it out of my head. Somebody that you can talk to and say, hey, I think I need to address this thing. And I always say, don't take the job home, but take the call home.
So Lou, when you have your crewmates that you're taking care of, and you're conscious of the fact that you're caring for them, but putting yourself down in a hole doing so, you say that communicating with your family what's going on is really important to make sure that you have somebody that'll take care of you.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And it's a circle. It's a circle. They'll take care of you, but you got to do your part. If your wife, says, or your other half, or your roommate, or whoever it is, says, hey, we need to talk. Listen, this is what I'm seeing, and what's going on. You can't flip that switch and go back to Mr. Macho, and not want to talk about it. You've got to be able to lose that pride, because it's for your own good.
Yeah, totally agree. Sometimes I know that people on this call too, on this conference, they feel as though only the people that were there with them on that call could relate to what they went through, and nobody else could burden anybody else with this story, or burden anybody else with the pain and suffering that they're feeling inside. So they choose not to share it. How did you overcome that?
Honestly, um, I didn't overcome it for a long, long time. But when when Christy came into my life, it 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 seemed like it was just a happening, like an accident, but it wasn't. Um, she has, during the early time of my recovery, she steered us and steered me to where I needed to be, and that's how I got my recovery started. And even after the first 3 months where I hadn't drank anything, um, she looked at me one night. She was going to kick me in the butt, and said, "When are you going to get serious about this?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? I'm not drinking." She goes, "No, but you're still a jerk," and that wasn't the word she used. And so that's what I'm talking about. When your spouse comes to you and says, "Hey, there's work to be done here. You need to talk to somebody." And after she told me that, I started doing 7 to 10 meetings a week. Whether I was playing at that Celebrate Recovery or not, I was still going to the meetings. I was hitting a couple AAs in the middle there. Um, and I got a sponsor and accountability friends. And after those 3 years, um, I put I put my faith in the middle of it. I put Jesus in the middle of it, and that's when I really started to heal. So, but it's not over. I still live one day at a time. I don't have that urge to drink, and I don't miss it. But I know that it's always there. So.
And Dara, I would just add that if there are spouses of whether they're still active first responders or retired, that you're going to be met with a wall of anger. I mean, potentially because you're challenging an old way, old habits, old thoughts, old beliefs that can be difficult to penetrate because, again, well, I've got a history of first responder as well. That wasn't my role at the time when we got together. And so in many ways, there were old routines and habits that I wasn't aware of. And so again, having that willingness to seek to understand, and even when met with that anger, to realize that it's anger that's in the moment coming your way, but it's not about you. And I think that's what I would share with spouses of first responders is that, a lot of what you experience, the silence, the shutdown, the anger, the just that lack of connection, that it's, you can try and try and try all you want, but in many ways, sometimes it's just about sitting in that space with them and allowing there to be just moments for willingness to share once that emotion starts to dissipate.
Yeah, that's a great point, Christy. And as you discuss that, I think about the term dry drunk. Somebody who you may not be drinking anymore, but you still have the same characteristics as someone who is ornery, feisty, pessimistic, cynical, hateful, spiteful, and I see Lou smirk, so you could relate to that, right? And just because you are sober now, you still have work to do, right? And I love that, Lou, you've been working at this for 11 years now, and you still see that you have a ways to go. And I feel like we all do. I don't think that you are in that boat alone. I think that good for you for recognizing that you're never too old to change, right? To make change, to be able to learn and to keep on improving. And I feel like that should be a lifelong goal for all of us. So it's good role modeling. We have another question that came up here, Lou. Says, do you think that leaders in the fire, police, and EMS services need more mental health awareness training to deal with their colleagues? And people know I don't use that word deal, but that's what the question says.
Well, and that's, you should always continue your education, no matter what it is. If you got an associate's degree, go for a bachelor's. If you got a bachelor's, go for an associate's degree and read. And that falls in there too, because it's something that you come across, so frequently. How you doing? Oh, I feel like crap today. Well, what's going on? I don't know. We had 24 calls last shift, and that one call we had in the middle, bang, there it is. And if you don't have the training and you're not listening for that kind of stuff from your partner, then you're going to miss it, and then it'll turn into something else, and they'll have something else happen, and your trauma will start to pile up, and then eventually there'll be a detonation in there. And so, yeah, that's a good question, but that's an easy answer. Absolutely. Get as much of that as you can get.
How do you feel we could prepare cadets and recruits, booters coming up through the fire service or even into any first responder organization to really honestly gain an appreciation for the volume of calls and the type of calls that they're going to encounter that will match what they will see, so that way they're not shell-shocked in their careers, to help reduce that?
Well, we have a saying in the fire service, and I think I've heard it on the police side too, is that we see things almost every day that the average person should not see. I think, and this is my opinion, is that you guys, BluePaz, need to have a day at all the training academies to where you go get these guys, and they're kind of they're kind of a captive audience, and where you can tell them about what's available to you and what to look for, and maybe have an invite your spouse day, something like that, where the more people that know about it, the less times we're going to have somebody drink a fifth and go put a gun in their mouth, so it's out there.
I know that some academies do that. I know Phoenix PD Academy does that with the spouse, and they bring the partner in and then they do that.
Right.
And I've seen this, and I've taught those classes too at the academy. And usually you see bright-eyed and bushy-tailed people who are like, that'll never happen to me. That person is weak. That's like somebody else. That's, I'll never get PTSD. In fact, I know folks that have been in fire and police service for, well over 30 years. and they until they get hit with post-traumatic stress issues, they're like, I never thought this could happen to me. Like now I feel broken, I feel weak, but my eyes are open that this could happen to anybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, the best example of that is uh, the police officer that came into that CISD. He was 2 weeks off. He used to stop at the station to use the bathroom and drink our coffee. And yeah, good job, man. You're done with probation. It was 2 weeks off probation. He takes it off, and I never signed up for this. Well, that tells me that somewhere in his academy, he didn't get all the information that he should have gotten, or else he wasn't paying attention on that day.
That is so true. All right, we have another comment question. Captain Lou, what advice would you give a wife or girlfriend who knows their significant other needs to speak to someone about the trauma and that the person has gone through? This person happens to be a detective in a homicide division, but they refuse to acknowledge it, and they say that it's her fault that he is the way that he is now. So essentially blaming and pushing and minimizing.
I will tell you that that's more of a question for you or Christy, not for
Yeah,
me.
Christy, you want to go for it?
What would you say, Christy?
Well, I know in many ways I would want to find out who does this person allow to speak into their lives. Who has permission to really speak truth to where this person will listen. Because if there's conflict between the first responder and the girlfriend or wife, then it's not going to be the relationship from the wife to be able to penetrate that, because that's now becoming contentious. So if there is someone that, again, the wife or the girlfriend can, just ask to speak into, the boyfriend, the spouse's world, to say, this is, I'm concerned. Here's where, I need your help and assistance, because it takes a community to link arms to sometimes encourage someone to really see what's happening, because we all have those blinders that can go on. And
This,
sometimes it's hard to see what we're doing. And so when there's a trusted relationship that has permission to speak into that person's life, that's who I would tap on the shoulder of, to be able to see if they can't make some headway with this person.
so you're saying that even for my wife, right? Like I may want to be that person that she trusts, but she may not have that kind of view of me to receive that information.
Right.
So maybe there might be a friend that is external that may be a non-player really in our life, but more trusting to her, where she
Absolutely.
would listen to.
Yeah, neighbor, a friend, there may be a pastor, there may be somebody that is outside, or it could also be someone that's in their unit, or, that again, there is some relational connection that, again, this person can speak truth into their loved ones, into their heart, basically, to help them see what's going on.
Excellent presentation. Lou and Christy, you guys are the couple of the year. I'm glad you guys both found each other because you're both very special people. And Christy knows how much I value her and really appreciate her with us at BluePaz. And this is a caliber of person. You represent all of our therapists really at BluePaz. So, and they're all equally as awesome. So Lou, thank you. Christy, thank you very much for taking the time today to share your stories and the advice that you've given. And
Thank you.
we'll be in touch again soon.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, guys.